The massive council chamber stretched across 5 kilometers of polished obsidian floor, its crystalline walls rising into shadows that seemed to swallow light itself. Representatives from 300 species filled the tiered seats, their varied forms creating a symphony of colors, textures, and barely contained hostility. The air hummed with tension thick enough to taste. At the center of this galactic amphitheater, Admiral Vextar of the Hegemony Fleet commanded attention. His towering figure dominated the prosecution platform, 4 muscular arms moving in calculated gestures as holographic evidence materialized around him. Each piece of data hung in the air like an accusation, glowing red against the chamber's dim lighting. "Behold the crimes of humanity." Vextar's voice boomed through translator circuits, reaching every ear in frequencies they could understand. His primary arms pointed to tactical displays showing human ship movements across the outer rim. 12 systems report the same vessel appearing without warning. No transponder codes, no diplomatic contact, just this thing, materializing from hyperspace and vanishing before our fastest interceptors could respond. The assembled representatives leaned forward in their seats. The reptilian Saurian delegation hissed among themselves, their scaled heads bobbing in agreement. The ethereal void singers pulsed with agitated light patterns, their translucent forms shimmering with barely contained emotion. Even the ancient crystalline elders, beings who had witnessed the birth of stars, seemed disturbed by the evidence. "Look at these energy signatures," Vextar continued, his voice rising with righteous anger. Secondary displays showed scanner, readings that defied explanation. These readings exceed our most conservative estimates by factors of 10, 20. Some measurements simply register as infinite. The very presence of this vessel violates 17 separate galactic treaties regarding weapons development. In the defendants section, a small enclosed area near the chamber's heart, Ambassador Li Huan sat with perfect stillness. His simple black diplomatic uniform contrasted sharply with the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by other representatives. Dark eyes moved methodically across the hostile faces surrounding him, noting every expression, cataloging every potential ally or enemy. His calm demeanor only seemed to irritate the prosecution further. Beside him, Defense Coordinator Park Yuna maintained equal composure while her fingers danced across a tablet surface. Data streams flowed past her eyes as she monitored communications from human colonies across the galaxy. Each report painted the same picture: fear, confusion, and growing demands for answers that Earth's government couldn't provide, without revealing secrets that would terrify the galaxy even more than their current accusations. "The defendant sits in silence," Vextar declared, gesturing toward the human delegation with obvious contempt. "No explanations, no justifications. They offer nothing but empty diplomatic protocols, while their war machine lurks in the shadows preparing for conquest." A ripple of agreement passed through the chamber. The insectoid hive queens clicked their mandibles in unison, creating a sound like breaking glass. The massive Titan representatives, each standing 3 meters tall, stomped their feet in a rhythm that shook the entire station. Even species known for their pacifist philosophies nodded gravely at the evidence. "Hi." Chancellor Mordoon rose from his crystalline throne, a structure that had grown from the chamber floor itself over centuries of his rule. His translucent form caught and refracted the chamber's lighting, creating rainbow patterns that danced across the walls. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of millennia. "The evidence presented is indeed troubling," Mordoon announced, his words echoing through quantum resonance chambers that amplified them to every corner of the vast space. "Humanity stands accused of violating the Galactic Weapons Limitation Treaty, the Non-Aggression Pact of Rigel 7, and the Sacred Covenant of Technological Restraint. These are not minor infractions, but fundamental breaches of the laws that have maintained peace for over 3,000 years. The Chancellor's form blazed brighter as he continued. Furthermore, the mysterious vessel's capabilities suggest humanity has developed technology that could destabilize the balance of power throughout the galaxy. We cannot allow any single species to possess such overwhelming advantages. Ambassador Li finally stood, his movement fluid and controlled, despite the weight of 300 species' attention focusing on him like a crushing force. "Honored Chancellor," If I may address— You may not, Vextar interrupted, his forearms crossed in a gesture of absolute dismissal. The time for human deception has ended. Your species has shown its true nature. We propose immediate expulsion. From the Galactic Council, complete trade sanctions and military containment of all human territories until this threat can be properly assessed. The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives turned to their advisors, their voices creating a cacophony of languages and communication methods. Some species communicated through color changes, others through electromagnetic pulses, and still others through methods that human science couldn't fully comprehend. The noise built to a crescendo that threatened to overwhelm the chamber's acoustic dampeners. Order! Chancellor Mordun's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. We shall proceed to formal voting, all in favor of Resolution 2847, the immediate expulsion of humanity from galactic society. The lights died. Emergency power kicked in a heartbeat later, bathing the chamber in hellish red illumination. Warning klaxons began their electronic shriek, a sound designed to penetrate the auditory ranges of hundreds of species simultaneously. Every holographic display flickered to life, showing the same impossible readings. Unknown vessel approaching, the station's AI announced, its synthetic voice somehow managing to convey confusion and terror. Classification, unknown. Mass readings, error, weapons signature, cannot compute. Through the chamber's massive viewing portals, space itself seemed to tear. Reality buckled and twisted as something vast pushed through hyperspace into normal space-time. The tear sealed itself, leaving behind a vessel that shouldn't exist. 300 species, masters of their domains, conquerors of worlds, shapers of galactic civilization, sat in absolute silence. The ship hanging in space before them defied every law of physics they understood. It was massive beyond comprehension, a dark wedge of metal and mystery that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange geometries played across its hull, surfaces that appeared to fold in on themselves in ways that hurt to observe directly. No one moved, no one spoke, no one even breathed. They simply stared at the impossible vessel that had just changed the fate of the galaxy forever. The human battleship Teguk hung in the void like a predator, carved from nightmares. Its dark hull stretched over a kilometer in length, covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move when nobody was looking directly at them. Weapon ports dotted its surface like sleeping eyes, each one larger than most fighter craft. The ship didn't just occupy space, it commanded it, bending the very fabric of reality around its presence. In the surrounding darkness, over 400 of the galaxy's most feared warships had gone completely silent. The massive hegemony dreadnoughts, each one capable of glassing a planet, drifted powerless with their weapon systems dark. Crystalline battle cruisers that could slice through asteroids with focused light beams sat motionless, their energy cores humming at minimum power. Even the legendary Void Hunters, ships that had never retreated from any battle in 3,000 years of warfare, held position like statues carved from metal and fear. Admiral Kexthor of the Rigelian Fifth Fleet gripped his command chair with claws that could cut through steel. His bridge crew, veterans of a dozen major conflicts, stared at their sensor displays in disbelief. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, his voice barely audible, "our targeting computers won't lock onto it. Every time we try, the system just stops working." "Keep trying," Kexthor growled, but his heart wasn't in the order. Something deep in his warrior's instincts screamed that targeting this vessel would be the last mistake he ever made. Aboard the Council station, emergency sirens wailed as automated defense systems struggled to categorize the newcomer. Massive. Railguns that could punch holes through moons tracked the Teguk's movement, but refused to achieve weapon lock. The station's AI, one of the most advanced systems in the galaxy, simply displayed error messages when asked to calculate the vessel's combat potential. Captain Kim Minho stood at the center of his bridge, a space that looked more like a meditation chamber than a military command center. Soft lighting illuminated control surfaces that seemed to grow from the floor itself. His crew moved with quiet efficiency around stations that responded to thought as much as touch. The bridge's main view screen showed the council station in perfect detail, surrounded by the greatest armada ever assembled. "Quite a welcoming committee," observed Lieutenant Commander Songara from her tactical station. Her displays showed every ship in the system, their weapons status, crew complement, and probable combat effectiveness. The data streams updated, in real time painting a picture of overwhelming firepower held in perfect check by something none of them could name. "They're scared," Communications Officer Choi Hyun reported, his voice tinged with wonder. "I'm monitoring over 15,000. Open channels, most of them are just breathing, heavy breathing. A few are praying in languages I've never heard before." Captain Kim's weathered face remained impassive as he studied the tactical display. 43 years in space had taught him to read the signs of impending battle and everything about. This situation screamed danger. Yet not a single alien vessel had powered weapons or moved to intercept. They simply waited, trapped between curiosity and terror. "Sir, we're receiving over 2,000 hail requests," Choi Hyun continued, his fingers dancing over controls that filtered the flood of incoming communications. "Every ship in the fleet wants to know our intentions. The hegemony flagship is demanding we identify ourselves. The Crystalline Confederation is requesting peaceful dialogue. The Saurian Empire is, well, they're mostly just screaming." Kim almost smiled at that. The Saurians were notorious for their aggressive nature, but even they recognized when they were outmatched. "Ignore them all," he said quietly. "Signal the station directly. Request permission to dock and address the council. Lieutenant Commander." Song frowned at her displays, her enhanced neural interfaces processing data streams too complex for unaugmented minds to follow. "Captain, I'm detecting their defense grid. It's actively targeting us, but the weapons aren't powering up. It's like they want to shoot but can't bring themselves to pull the trigger." "Smart of them," Kim replied, his voice carrying undertones that made his crew straighten unconsciously. "They can sense what this ship really is, even if they don't. Understand it. Open a channel to the station, all frequencies, make sure everyone hears this." The bridge fell silent except for the subtle hum of systems that operated beyond current galactic understanding. When Kim spoke, his voice carried across. Space with crystal clarity, reaching every ship and every being in the system simultaneously. "Galactic Council, this is Captain Kim Minho of the Earth battleship Taeguk. I request permission to address the charges against humanity. I come alone, unarmed, with information that concerns the survival of every species represented here. The transmission cut through hundreds of communication protocols, bypassing encryption and security systems as if they didn't exist. On every bridge in every command center, alien beings heard those words in their native languages with perfect translation and terrifying clarity." Silence stretched across the void like a held breath. Minutes ticked by, while the greatest military minds in the galaxy struggled to process what they were experiencing. The ship's hull told stories of battles beyond imagination, scorch marks from weapons that shouldn't exist, impact craters from projectiles the size of buildings, and stranger damage that seemed to bend reality around its edges. On the council station, High Chancellor Mordun's crystalline form flickered with indecision. His advisors, beings who had counseled galactic leaders for centuries, found themselves speechless. The ship before them incorporated design principles that violated fundamental laws of physics. Its very existence challenged everything they thought. They knew about technology and warfare. "Chancellor," whispered his military advisor, an ancient void singer whose ethereal form pulsed with agitation, "our analysts can't even determine what materials its hull is made from. The energy signatures suggest technology thousands of years beyond our current capabilities." Finally, after 10 eternal minutes, Chancellor Mordun's voice crackled through the communication array. "Permission? Granted. Dock at Bay 7. You may address the Council." The Taeguk began its approach to the station with movements that defied conventional physics. Instead of the typical thruster burns and course corrections, it simply glided forward, as if space itself was pulling it along. Its massive bulk moved with the grace of a dancer, never wavering from its chosen path. Not a single ship moved to intercept. the galaxy's greatest warriors, beings who had conquered star systems and toppled empires, simply watched in awe and terror. They were witnessing something that transcended their understanding of warfare, technology, and power itself. As the Teguk drew closer to the station, its true scale became apparent. The docking bay, designed for the largest diplomatic vessels, looked like a child's toy beside the approaching behemoth. Yet the ship adjusted its approach with impossible precision, somehow making itself fit into a space that should have been far too small. The greatest military force ever assembled hung, motionless in space, paralyzed by the simple truth that they were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. Something new had arrived, something that made their mightiest weapons look like toys, and their greatest achievements seem like the fumbling efforts of children. The age of galactic dominance was ending, and everyone present knew it. The massive doors of the council chamber parted with a deep rumble that resonated through the station's hull. Captain Kim Minho stepped through the entrance, and the sound of his boots on the polished obsidian floor seemed to echo louder than thunder. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every movement froze. 300 species, representing civilizations, that had ruled the stars for millennia, turned to watch a single human walk across their sacred chamber. Kim wore no medals, no ceremonial weapons, no symbols of rank beyond simple captain's bars on his collar. His black uniform looked almost primitive compared to the elaborate ceremonial garments surrounding him. The crystalline elders wore robes of living light that shifted through every color of the spectrum. The hegemony fleet officers sported armor that could deflect plasma cannons. The ethereal void singers existed as barely contained energy wrapped in gossamer-thin containment fields. Yet none of that mattered. Every eye in the chamber followed the human as he walked the long path to the central speaking platform. His stride was steady, unhurried, carrying the confidence of someone who had faced death in the void between stars and emerged unchanged. Ambassador Li Huan felt his chest tighten with pride as he watched his friend and commander approach the podium. Beside him, Coordinator Park Yuna's fingers had gone still on her tablet for the first time in hours. The weight of the moment pressed down on them all, 3 humans representing their entire species before the most powerful gathering in galactic history. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. Some of the alien representatives began shifting in their seats, their various forms of communication creating subtle light displays, chemical releases, and electromagnetic pulses that painted the chamber in barely visible patterns of anxiety and anticipation. Kim reached the central podium and placed his hands on the speaking lectern, a device that had amplified the voices of galactic leaders for over 2,000 years. When he spoke, his words carried with perfect clarity to every corner of the vast space. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice calm and measured, "you have accused humanity of developing forbidden weapons. You fear our technology threatens the peace you have maintained for 3 millennia. His gaze swept across the assembled aliens, meeting eyes, optical sensors, and stranger organs of perception with equal directness. "You are absolutely correct to fear, but not for the reasons you think." A ripple of tension passed through the chamber. The Saurian delegation hissed among themselves, their forked tongues tasting the air for pheromones of deception. The massive Titan representatives leaned forward in their reinforced seats, their stone-like faces showing the first expressions of genuine interest. Admiral Vextar couldn't contain himself any longer. His forearms spread wide as he rose from his seat, his voice booming through his translator implants. "Your ship violates 17 separate treaties. Your weapons exceed every safety limit we've established. You cannot simply appear here and expect us to ignore our weapons," Kim interrupted, his quiet voice somehow cutting through Vextar's shouting like a blade through silk. "We're not built for you." The statement hit the chamber like a physical force. Representatives who had been preparing their own accusations found their words dying in their throats. The simple declaration carried implications that reverberated through every political calculation, every military assessment, every assumption they had made about human intentions. Kim activated a small device on the podium, and the chamber's holographic systems responded instantly. The air above the assembly filled with images, that defied immediate comprehension. Vast stretches of empty space where something should have been, stellar coordinates that led to nothing but cosmic void. 3 years ago, Kim continued as the images shifted and focused, our deep space monitoring station at Wolf 359 detected anomalous energy signatures. The hologram displayed wave patterns unlike anything in the galactic databases, frequencies that seemed to exist in dimensions beyond normal spacetime. These signals originated from beyond our galactic rim, from the void between galaxies. The chamber's environmental systems struggled to maintain atmosphere as hundreds of different species held their breath simultaneously. The images changed again, showing long-range sensor data from human deep space probes. What they revealed chilled the blood of every being present. Ships, massive beyond comprehension, moving through the darkness between galaxies like predators stalking through an endless night. Their design followed no known principles, incorporating geometries that hurt to observe directly. They moved in perfect formation, thousands upon thousands of vessels that dwarfed even the largest space stations. "We investigated," Kim said simply, as if describing a routine patrol mission rather than humanity's first contact with cosmic horror. "What we found changed everything. New images materialized, worlds stripped to their cores, their surfaces glowing with the sickly light of harvested energy. Star systems reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma, entire sectors of space emptied of all matter, all energy, all trace that life had ever existed there. We call them the Devourers," Kim announced, and the name seemed to echo in dimensions beyond sound. "They have consumed 17 galaxies over the past million years. Each time the pattern remains identical. Arrival, assessment, systematic harvesting of all organic and technological resources, complete sterilization. They leave nothing behind except empty space and radiation signatures that take millennia to fade." Coordinator Park Yuna rose from her seat, her movement drawing attention like a magnet. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "The forbidden technology you fear, our advanced weapons, our impossible ship designs, our violations of your precious treaties, none of it was developed to threaten your species. It was our desperate attempt to create something, anything, capable of fighting what's coming." The holographic display shifted to show tactical projections, mathematical models that made the blood of every military officer in the chamber run cold. Probability cascades, resource calculations, timeline analyses, all pointing to the same inevitable conclusion. "They will reach the outer edge of our galaxy in 4 years, 2 months, and 16 days, Park continued, her voice never wavering despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. "Every ship you see in this system, every fleet you command, every weapon in your arsenals, according to our projections, none of it will slow them down for more than a few hours." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the chamber's environmental system seemed to quiet in the face of such devastating revelation. High Chancellor Morden's crystalline form flickered through stress patterns that hadn't been seen in his species for over 1,000 years. His advisors, beings who had guided galactic policy through wars and golden ages alike, found themselves paralyzed by the scope of the threat. Kim let the silence stretch until it became unbearable before delivering his final words. "So tell me, honored representatives, do the charges against humanity still seem significant? Are you still concerned about our violations of weapons treaties, when everything you've built, everything you've achieved, everything you are will be consumed by entities that view your greatest accomplishments as nothing more than a light snack?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence, transforming a trial about human aggression into a desperate council of war against extinction itself. The silence stretched across the council chamber like a cancer, eating away at the confidence of beings who had never known true fear. Minutes crawled by as 300 species processed the implications of what they had just witnessed. The holographic images of dead galaxies hung in the air like tombstones, each one representing billions of civilizations that had faced the same fate now approaching them. Admiral Vextar's forearms trembled as he gripped his command staff. His voice, when it finally came, sounded hollow and desperate. "These These projections could be fabricated, computer simulations designed to terrify us into submission. How do we know any of this is real? Captain Kim's weathered face remained impassive, but something dark flickered behind his eyes. Because we've fought them. The simple statement hit the chamber like a plasma cannon blast. Before anyone could respond, the holographic display transformed into something that made every military officer present feel their blood turn to ice water. Battle footage began playing, not clean tactical simulations or training exercises, but raw combat recordings from actual engagements. The first image showed a human colony world, New Busan, with its gleaming cities and orbital platforms. Then, the sky began to darken as massive shapes emerged from hyperspace. The Devourer ships appeared like nightmares given form, irregular, organic-looking vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with predatory grace, their hulls pulsing with veins of sickly green energy. 6 months ago, Coordinator Park Yuna's voice cut through the stunned silence. Their advanced scouts reached the outer territories, 3 human colonies, and 1 Rigelian outpost detected on long-range sensors. Her voice remained steady, but her hands clenched into fists as she relived the memory. We responded with everything we had. The 5th Colonial Defense Fleet, 67 ships including 2 heavy cruisers and a battle station. The footage shifted to show the human fleet's approach. Standard formation, weapons hot, crews confident in their superior firepower and training. The Rigelian outpost commander had laughed when he saw the human response, calling it typical human overkill for what appeared to be a few dozen enemy vessels. That laughter died quickly when the battle began. The first exchange of fire shattered every assumption about space combat the Council had ever held. Human plasma cannons that could vaporize asteroids struck the Devourer ships and simply disappeared. The energy seemed to be absorbed into the alien hulls, making them glow brighter rather than causing damage. Railgun projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed hit the enemy vessels and bounced off like pebbles thrown at a mountain. Our conventional weapons were useless, Kim continued, his voice carrying the weight of command decisions that had cost thousands of lives. Every tactic we developed over centuries of warfare meant nothing against enemies that could absorb our heaviest firepower. The Devourer counterattack was devastating in its efficiency. Beams of energy that existed in spectrums beyond normal light lanced out from the alien ships. Where they touched human vessels, matter simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, erased from reality as if it had never been there. The heavy cruiser Seoul took a direct hit and vanished completely, leaving only empty space and expanding clouds of energy. The assembled aliens watched in horror as ship after ship disappeared from the tactical display. The Saurian military, Attache hissed continuously, his forked tongue tasting the air as stress pheromones flooded his system. The crystalline elder's light patterns shifted through colors that indicated deep distress, while the massive Titan representatives sat frozen like statues carved from living stone. Then something changed in the footage. A new ship appeared on the battlefield, sleek, dark, and moving with impossible grace. The Taeguk entered the engagement zone and suddenly the tide of battle shifted. Its weapons carved through Devourer formations like a sword through silk, each shot precisely targeted at weak points that shouldn't have existed. The Taeguk was still experimental then, Kim explained, as they watched his ship dance between enemy fire that could erase reality itself. Built using salvage technology from a Devourer probe we'd intercepted 2 years earlier. We barely understood how it worked, but we knew it was our only hope. The battle footage showed the experimental battleship's weapons in action. Instead of conventional energy beams or projectiles, the Taeguk fired something that looked like controlled tears in space-time. Where these weapons struck, Devourer ships didn't just take damage, they folded in on themselves, their exotic matter hulls collapsing into dimensions that hurt to observe directly. But even with the Taeguk's intervention, the battle was a massacre. Of 67 human ships, only 3 survived. The experimental battleship and 2 prototype destroyers limped away from the engagement zone, their hulls scarred by weapons that shouldn't exist. Behind them, New Busan burned as the Devourers began their harvesting process. We saved what we could, Kim's voice cracked slightly as he watched the evacuation footage. Refugee ships fleeing the dying world while Devourer harvesting beams stripped away the planet's atmosphere and surface. 2 million people made it to the evacuation ships. 18 million didn't. The chamber remained silent except for the sound of various species breathing in patterns that indicated severe distress. Even the most hardened military veterans among them had never witnessed destruction on such a scale, carried out with such clinical efficiency. Park Yuna stepped forward, her tablet displaying new tactical data. The encounter taught us everything we needed to know about their capabilities and their weaknesses. The Devourers are incredibly powerful, but they're not invincible. Their technology relies on exotic matter manipulation and dimensional energy tapping. Disrupt those systems and they become vulnerable. A new holographic display materialized, showing the approaching Devourer main fleet in terrifying detail. The long-range sensor data revealed thousands of ships moving in perfect formation through the void between galaxies. Each vessel dwarfed the largest space stations, their hulls bristling with the same reality-warping weapons that had devastated the human colonies. High Chancellor Morden's crystalline form flickered through stress patterns that hadn't been seen in his species for millennia. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute despair. The scale, it's impossible. How do we fight something like this? Our combined fleets number less than 10,000 ships. They have, how many? Current estimates suggest over 50,000 vessels in their advanced fleet alone, Park replied grimly, with main force elements numbering in the hundreds of thousands, and that's just what we can detect with long-range sensors. Ambassador Li Huan stood for the first time since the session began, his diplomatic composure finally cracking under the weight of impending extinction. With everything we have, together, united under a single command structure with shared technology and coordinated tactics, or we die separately, one species at a time, exactly as they planned. Captain Kim stepped forward, his presence somehow filling the vast chamber despite his simple uniform and quiet demeanor. The Taeguk was built using technology we reverse-engineered from captured Devourer wreckage. It's currently the only ship in our combined fleets capable of engaging them on equal terms. But one ship, no matter how advanced, cannot save an entire galaxy. The chamber erupted into chaos as representatives began talking simultaneously in hundreds of languages. Fear and desperation replaced the earlier hostility toward humanity as the reality of their situation sank in. The hegemony fleet officers demanded technical specifications. The Rigelian commanders wanted tactical assessments. The Void Singers pulsed with agitated light patterns, while the Saurian delegation hissed among themselves in rapid, panicked tones. High Chancellor Morden raised his hand for silence, his crystalline form dimming with exhaustion that seemed to age him centuries in minutes. "What exactly do you propose, Captain Kim?" Kim's answer was simple and terrifying in its implications. Total alliance, every species, every ship, every weapon we can muster, complete technological sharing, unified command structure, and the construction of 1,000 ships like the Taeguk, using combined galactic resources and human design principles. The weight of extinction settled over the council chamber like a suffocating blanket, transforming ancient enemies into desperate allies facing the end of everything they had ever known. The debate that followed Captain Kim's proposal transformed the council chamber into a storm of voices, colors, and electromagnetic pulses. 300 species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of diplomatic warfare suddenly found themselves arguing for their very existence. The air crackled with tension as ancient grudges collided with desperate necessity. The Saurian ambassador raised his scaled head high, his forked tongue flicking rapidly as he tasted the pheromones of fear flooding the chamber. "You expect us to place our sacred fleet under human command? Our species that barely learned to travel between stars when we were already masters of 50 systems." The crystalline elders pulsed with agitated light patterns, their translucent forms flickering between spectrums of doubt and terror. The humans present no proof of tactical superiority beyond their claims. How do we know their methods are superior to strategies we have refined over millennia? Admiral Vextar's forearms gestured wildly as he addressed the chamber. Even if this threat is real, why should humanity lead? Their species is young, untested in large-scale galactic warfare. The hegemony has commanded successful military operations for 3,000 years. The Void Singers responded with harmonic frequencies that translated as pure skepticism. Show us victories, not theories. Demonstrate this tactical knowledge you claim to possess. Hours crawled by as the debate consumed precious time they didn't have. Species representatives demanded detailed technical specifications, tactical breakdowns, and strategic assessments. The Rigelian Empire wanted proof of human fleet coordination capabilities. The Titan Collective questioned human understanding of multidimensional warfare. The insectoid hive queens clicked their mandibles in rhythmic patterns that indicated deep distrust of any non-hive command structure. Captain Kim stood silently at the podium, his weathered face showing no emotion. As chaos swirled around him, his hands remained steady on the lectern, while diplomats who had never seen real combat argued about theoretical battle scenarios. Behind him, the holographic displays continued showing the approaching darkness that would consume them all if they couldn't find unity. Coordinator Park Yuna leaned toward Ambassador Lee, her voice barely audible above the arguing. At this rate, we'll still be debating when the Devourers arrive. Finally, Captain Kim had heard enough. His quiet voice cut through the cacophony like a blade through silk, stopping every argument mid-sentence. We don't have time for politics. The poi. Simple statement carried more authority than all the diplomatic protocols in the galaxy. Kim activated his personal comm unit, the device linking directly to the Teguk through quantum entanglement channels that ignored distance and interference. Lieutenant Commander Song, project the real-time scanner data. All frequencies, full spectrum analysis. The response came instantly through speakers that materialized sound from quantum fluctuations in the air itself. Aye, Captain. Transmitting now. Every display in the council chamber blazed to life simultaneously, showing current sensor readings from human monitoring stations positioned along the galactic rim. The data streams updated in real time, painting a picture that froze the blood of every being present. There, at the very edge of detection range, where space itself began to thin toward the intergalactic void, dark shapes moved between the stars. Not the theoretical projections they had seen earlier, but actual sensor contacts. Massive objects that registered on gravitational detectors despite being too distant for visual confirmation. The Devourer fleet was no longer approaching. It had already arrived at the galaxy's edge. "Dear gods of all our ancestors," whispered the Rigelian fleet commander, his proud military bearing crumbling as he processed the implications. "They're already here." Park Yuna's voice cut through the stunned silence with clinical precision. "They've accelerated their approach beyond our most aggressive projections. Analysis indicates they're using some form of space-folding technology to reduce travel time. New estimate for first contact with outer rim colonies. 18 months, possibly less." The mathematical reality hit the chamber like a physical blow. 18 months to prepare for a war against entities that had consumed 17 galaxies. 18 months to unite species that had been enemies for millennia. 18 months to develop weapons, tactics, and defenses against technology that operated beyond their understanding of physics. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the environmental system seemed to quiet in the face of such overwhelming odds. High Chancellor Mordun's crystalline form flickered through stress patterns that indicated his species' equivalent of a complete psychological breakdown. Then, slowly, Admiral Vextar rose from his seat. The being who had spent hours prosecuting humanity for treaty violations now trembled as he faced the reality of extinction. His forearms shook as he gripped his command staff, the symbol of hegemony military authority that suddenly seemed as fragile as ancient parchment. The hegemony. "Fleet," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "places itself under human command.